right, Greg. So here we are at the pilot episode of what we ended up calling Independent Podcast Review. We've talked about doing this for the last year and a half, and one of the biggest obstacles that we had was coming up with a name, right? Yeah, it's kind of cheesy, but we wanted to play off the IPR name, so we came up with Independent Podcast Review. And before we start, I think we do quick introductions. Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so I'm Jeff Brenneman. I'm a fan of Independent Project Records and Independent Project Press, and have been for quite a while. I am not an insider by any means, so I'm glad that we have a co-host who knows a little bit more than I, and an expert here as our first guest today. So I first came to know about Independent Project Records by listening to a community radio station here in Southern California. It was Palomar Community College. And I had requested KKK Took My Baby Away by the Ramones. And while I was waiting for that song to play, I heard a track by a band called The 3 O'Clock in my own time. So I called the radio station. The DJ's name was Art Deco. He went by Art Deco. And he said it's from a compilation called Radio Tokyo Tapes. So immediately went down the next day to my local record store, which was, what's it called? Lou's Records down in Encinitas, bought the compilation, heard Mobilization by Savage Republic, and I was immediately hooked. So started buying the singles, Tragic Figures, and then everything I could get my hands on from there on. So Greg, our goal is to go back and at some point, maybe talk about some of those early releases, starting with IPR 001, but that's not today. Today, we want to talk about the future. So Greg, you're an insider, multi-instrumentalist. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Greg Grunke, and I've known Bruce for several decades. Played in Savage Republic, probably till about 2009, 2010. I've also worked with some of the other Savage Republic related bands, such as 17 Pygmies, where I'm now working with Mr. Brenneman and Phil Jackson Del Rey Drucker, and also with other people that are sort of related to that whole scene, with, like, did some playing with Autumn Fair. And did I ever do anything with White Glove Test? I don't think so. We recorded at your place.
Yeah. So there was a connection with White Glove Test. So.
Yeah, so that's about it.
Very cool.
I like Thai food, puppies, and long walks, and that kind of stuff.
Nice. Well, our very special guest for our pilot episode, and we're very honored, is Bruce Licher, who founded Independent Project Records. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us on this pilot episode.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm glad that you guys wanted to pull this together.
Yeah, it took us a little while. So Bruce, our first question, and we wanted to try to keep this focus today, which is something that's difficult for me to do, but we want to talk about the future of Independent Project Records, because we know it has a vast history. And like I said, we'd like to get into that sometime. But can you talk about the relaunch of Independent Project Records and why now and who you're working with?
Yeah, well, Independent Project was something I started when I was back at UCLA, which is where I met Greg originally, and it was something that I was very passionate about for several decades, until the early 20th century or 21st century, and then it reached a point where I needed to focus more on my graphic design and my letterpress business, because that was what was really paying the bills. And things were changing in the music industry at that point, and I just felt like, okay, I'm going to step back a little bit. There were a couple of projects that I got to do in the early 2000s, Springhouse CD, and then a Red Temple Spirits retrospective. But realistically, it all started coming back together when I was approached by Rich Kegler at P22 Type Foundry, and he was interested in putting together a book, a monograph of my work for the record label, as well as just the graphic design and print work that I had done over the years. And so we ended up spending several years pulling that together, and it finally came out in early 2020. And we ended up collaborating on another independent Project Records release. Through that, there was a compilation album called Tape Excavation, which was originally conceived to come along with or accompany the deluxe edition of the book. But we decided to make some additional copies to sell because we figured there would be people interested in the music and maybe, didn't want to get the book or couldn't afford it or whatever. We just figured it should be a standalone piece as well. So that all came out, and at the same time I had been working with my old friend Stuart Sweezy on kind of helping him with some promotional things for his Desolation Center film. And once he had finished that film and started taking it around to film festivals, he got it in the Nevada City Film Festival through our old friend Jeffrey Clark, who was the singer in Shiva Burlesque, and he's the head of the film festival in Nevada City where he had relocated.
Wow.
So I ended up going up there and kind of representing the film at the film festival, and Jeff and I reconnected after a number of years, and he said he'd been thinking he wanted to do a record label again, and he really liked the idea of collaborating with me on that. And so he and I began to discuss, the possibility of doing this again, and he was in a position to be able to help fund this. And at the same time, Darla Records had approached me about a distribution situation. And so all these things just sort of dovetailed all at once in last year, in 2020. And it took us through the end of the year to really pull all the pieces together and make a business plan and get things set up to move forward. And so basically we are now in our first release has just come out last week, the Source compilation. And we have several other releases coming out next month, and we have a very ambitious release schedule, which we're going to do our best to keep up with. We're in the process of kind of pulling together a small team to help make that happen, because it's a lot of work especially to do the releases the way that we want to do them, with special hand letterpress printed packages and obviously music now, a lot of people consume it in digital form, streaming, downloads, whatever. But we feel like the physical aspect, that's what we grew up with, and that's very important to us. And so not only with the CDs, but the vinyl. And our goal was to create, particularly with the CDs, something that was special and that people would want to have, because it was a cool artifact.
Here's the release the right way. And it just looks beautiful. Can you talk about how you guys came together? There's 19 tracks on here. How did you and Jeffrey come to this particular track listing and these artists that you've included?
Well, one of the things that, the main focus we decided on for Independent Project, at least starting out, is as kind of a reissue and archival label. The history of Independent Project, there's a lot of really interesting artists and releases that are out of print, or maybe they didn't get released in a certain format. And we're feeling like there's a very, something special about the releases that we're choosing to work with. And in a lot of cases, there is additional material that we're able to pull together and expand these original releases with. So that's our goal, is to document what we feel is a very special part of our musical history that we grew through and participated in. So Source came together because we figured, okay, this is a relaunch, a major relaunch of the label, and we wanted people to be able to get a feel for what the label was about, what the history of the label was about, and where we're going. And so our goal was to kind of have it be about 1/3 things that are from current catalog, things that have been available, that are still available. About 1/3 of it will be songs from upcoming releases. And then about 1/3 of it will be songs that are going to be exclusive to the compilation. So that if you want that music, then you have to buy the compilation. You can't just wait until it comes out down the road. So we figured that was a really nice way to pull it together. And the interesting thing is that we weren't actually planning to do this release when, at the beginning of the year, when we started working on getting the label up and running again. It was only once we got into it and realized that the vinyl pressing plants were so backed up that we wouldn't be able to get vinyl for 6-8 months. And we thought, wow, we need to get something out before the end of the year. So we thought, okay, we can have CDs. They can be turned around fairly quickly. CD pressing plants, you can usually get stuff turned around in a couple of weeks. So then it was just a matter of creating the package. So that was when we started thinking about, okay, well, let's do a compilation that's CD and digital only. And so realistically, I mean, that whole track listing came together in about a 2-month time period. Jeff and I just brainstormed, okay, who are some of the important artists that we want to make sure we include? What are some of the interesting tracks that we already know about that maybe haven't been released before that could be, enticing for people to want to hear? And so it was a really fun process of pulling it together, and of course, almost everybody that we approached about it was very enthusiastic.
So you've already got somewhat of a schedule, I understand. I've already pre-ordered the next 2 releases, I believe, Half String and Scenic. So can you talk to us a little bit about what we can expect from Independent Project Records in the next year or 2?
Yeah. So basically, one of the things that Jeff and I talked about is that we feel like the label itself is saying something. It's not just a bunch of artists on the label. It's how the artists and the label work together. And so we decided we wanted to put releases out in pairs of releases, 2 releases at a time, so that we would have releases that somehow kind of work together in one sense or another, or help to give a broader range of, okay, what is the label about? What is it that we're doing here? And so we decided to reissue the Soul full-length album from Half String, mid-90s shoegaze group from Tempe, Arizona, that I was very closely connected with for a period of time. That was something that Brandon had already been working on. Brandon Capps from from Half String. He had already been starting to work on transferring the tapes and getting it remastered. And so it was a perfect, just sort of, okay, great, we can plug this one into the schedule. And then the Scenic Incident at SEMA, we thought that was important because it kind of goes along with Stuart Sweezy's Desolation Center film, because 4 of the songs from Incident at SEMA are used prominently in the soundtrack for the film, including a song called Carrying On to Cadiz, which is in the opening title credits. And he used that beautifully in there. I mean, for me, I've always thought Scenic's music needs to be soundtracking a film. And for him, when I sent him his editor, the CD, I talked to his editor at the opening of it, and his editor said, when Stuart gave me this CD, I listened to it and I said, Stuart, here's the soundtrack to your film.
Yeah.
So they chose 4 of the songs, and for me, it was thrilling to just be able to see how the music worked with the visuals, and because I've always wanted to see that happen. So it's a great opportunity to kind of bring that album back, introduce it to some new people, but also kind of connect it to Stuart's film, because I think Stuart's film is a very special document and it's really well made.
So can you talk about what the following two pair would be, or are we jumping the gun here?
We can talk about those two because they're going to be announced fairly soon. So Jeff Clark was in a band in the late 80s called Shiva Burlesque, and I was involved at least in helping them release the first of those two albums. So he had been working on an expanded reissue of their second album, Mercury Blues, and including a number of demo tapes and other things. And then Jeff is also very close to a number of other musicians in the Northern California area. And so the other album that's being paired with the Shiva Burlesque album is a retrospective by a San Francisco group called the Ophelias.
Oh, wow.
Released 3 albums and an EP during the 80s, late 80s. And the track that we used on Source from the Ophelias is not going to be on that. It's a unique track. So, I mean, I think it's an extremely strong track. It's a wonderful piece. But Leslie Medford from the Ophelias had already put together this retrospective called Bear Bodkin, and he feels very strongly, okay, this is how this album needs to be. And so we're, obviously letting him say what he wants to do on that. But we're really fortunate that we were able to get his song Capital for the Source CD.
So Bruce, one thing that's always been interesting to me, and one thing that I've always wondered, because the artwork of all independent project records releases are amazing. They're like, all of them are like artwork pieces in and of themselves. And then of course, the music content is just amazing as well. For you personally, as an artist, as a printer, as a musician, is there one over the other that's more important to you? Or do you look at it as the whole project, the musical content and the actual aesthetic presentation?
I think it's all one. It's okay. To me, that's the idea, is to take music that either I create or that other people create that I think is very special and is showing some sort of unique qualities that speaks to me. I mean, that's the most important thing, is that it's got to be something that speaks to me. And of course, now I'm a partner. Jeff Clark and I are partners, and so he is bringing into IPR things, music that speaks to him. So we've agreed that we are both bringing projects. We're both creative directors and A&R people for the label. So that's a new thing for me, because up until this point, it was all, okay, it's what I want to do. But at the same time, I felt like there's definitely some limitations to that. And I think Jeff is bringing some amazing energy into what we're doing and resources to be able to make this happen. And one of the reasons that we went with Darla is that they offered to help us with some manufacturing costs. And so there's a lot of different elements that just sort of all dovetail together nicely there. But as far as the music and the graphics and everything, to me, I mean, my goal at the beginning of Independent Project Records, my first release, was I want to make a record as a piece of fine art. Limited edition or not, it doesn't even have to be limited, but the idea being that you would be looking through the bins back in the days when people looked through the bins. You see this thing and you pull it out and go, wow, what's this?
I was a little bit curious that along with the archival aspect of it, are you also looking to put out, I mean, are you actively looking for new bands, new projects, something like that? And if so, is there anything scheduled or?
So Jeff and I both agreed that if there was something that was current, that felt like it was appropriate to release, that we would do that we would put that out on IPR. And obviously, if he or I make new music, then we have a vehicle for having that come out, or any of the artists that we're working with, if there's a new project that they're creating, which feels appropriate for us to do. I mean, we don't want to just put something out that doesn't feel right for IPR.
Right. If assuming that they have the right aesthetic. It's a fit.
Yeah, and the right attitude. I mean, we don't want to have problem bands. We don't need that. We're getting old. We don't want to deal with that. But I mean, realistically, we're not set up to kind of be a full service record label for a current artist. That's not our goal. There are plenty of other labels for that purpose. But if there's an artist that is creating something beautiful and new that speaks to Jeff or I, or both of us, preferably both of us, then and that person or that artist is interested in what we can bring to the table, then yeah, we definitely would do that. And it's interesting that you asked that, because actually Jeff just the other night said, hey, I got an idea for this current artist that I'm aware of that I met years ago. And what do you think of this? So we are in the beginning stages of discussing whether we can do a release for this person. We'll see what happens. And there will be new music. I mean, I know that I'm planning on doing new music. I've been working on music with my wife, Karen, under the name SR2, and we have an album's worth of material that we need to record. So, and then it needs to get out. So.
Yeah, that was my other question, was when are you going to put out some SR2 stuff?
We have to record it first. And
details.
Yes, I know. But we will get there.
So Bruce, before we let you go, for any of our watchers that are watching this and they want to follow Independent Project Records in the future, or look for some of the releases, can you tell our viewers where they should go?
Yeah, so we have the usual social media channels, the Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We also have just recently set up a YouTube channel for Independent Project Records. We've just finished debuting sound video clips of all 19 songs from Source. So if anybody wants to go get a feel for the music that's on Source, go to the YouTube, Independent Project Records YouTube channel, and you'll get sound clips of all of that. We also recently finished up just a kind of a basic preliminary website for Independent Project Records, which is independentprojectrecords.com. We are going to be expanding on that, obviously, as we move forward. And then Darla Records is our distributor, darla.com. So they're a good source for finding out more information about what we're doing.
Yes, and for anybody watching, you could order Source now. Get your copy. It's amazing. You can pre-order the next 2 releases, which I've done through Darla. And Bruce, are there still copies of Savage Impressions available? My book is back here, and my album is back here. Are those still available?
They are. P22.com is the website for purchasing. They do. I believe that they do still have a few of the deluxe editions available. They had some extras, and so they're unnumbered deluxe, but they're sort of semi-deluxe, I guess. We also do have some copies. Independent Project Records has a Bandcamp store as well at the moment, so we do have a few copies for sale there as well.
Yeah, and there's several releases that are available through the Bandcamp site as well.
Yes.
Not just the new ones or the future ones. There's some legacy releases there as well.
Yes, yeah, we're trying. At this point, the Bandcamp store has pretty much everything that's still available in the back catalog on either vinyl or CD. and we'll be adding more things to it as time goes on.
Excellent. Excellent. Very good. Bruce, we really appreciate you taking time to meet with us for our pilot episode, Greg and I.
My
And,
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
and we
Thank
hope
you for
to be able to go back and dig through some of the catalog and focus on these amazing releases that were started way back in 1980, decades ago. So still worth listening to. So Greg and I hope to be able to talk to some of the artists involved and work our way through the catalog. Isn't that right, Greg?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Learn these new kids what's going on.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Bruce. We appreciate you taking time with us today. And congratulations on the relaunch. From what I've seen already, it's amazing. And I'm super happy, of course.
Glad about it.
All right. Thank you, Bruce.
All right.
Thanks, Bruce.
Take care.